It was a very close vote, and I think that council was very thoughtful and very respectful of the conversation and figuring out how to move forward. So I've said for a long time in front of many cameras and microphones that I am less pro-Olympics than I am pro a great deal for Calgary and pro what is right for Calgary. And so when this agreement started to take shape and started to finalize, and I'm happy to talk a little more about that if you like, but when the agreement started to take shape and started to finalize, I had to ask myself, am I irritated about the process? Am I irritated about the leaks and the inaccuracy and all of this drama? Yeah, but ultimately I have to go back to those two questions. Is this right for Calgary? And is this a good deal? The other question that I had for myself is I've said from the very beginning that it's really important that Calgarians have the time to make a decision before they vote. And even when I left here last night, I was really struggling with, is this enough time for Calgarians, right? Is this enough time for people to really be able to digest this before they go to the polling booth? And I had the chance to talk to a lot of people last night, just out and about in the community as I always am. People who don't spend all their lives on Twitter or Facebook. And every one of them, yes or no, said to me, of course we should vote. And I explained, look, council is divided. It's going to be a complicated deal to explain to people. And they said, don't condescend. Give us the deal, let us look at it, and let us vote. So ultimately that was the driving force behind my vote today, to ensure that people really had the right to vote. But I'll tell you one other thing. This is an incredibly good deal. After all that sausage making, the sausage that came out of it is amazing. Think about this. We get a field house that we've got to fund anyway. We get the renovations to McMahon Stadium and the other infrastructure that we need to do. We put in $390 million, of which $40 million is net new. And in return for that $40 million net new, we get $4 billion of investment in Calgary. That's 100 times return. Even if you take the entire $400 million, I should say, $390 million for us to put in, that's still a 10 times return. I'll take that deal. And so over the next few days, I will be trying to explain this deal to people, but I am now at the point where I can actually say to people, this is a great deal. This is a great deal we've negotiated, and I'm encouraging people to vote yes.
Do you think the process has eroded the confidence of Calgarians in it? It's been up and down, it's been somewhat public, somewhat messy.
It's been really messy. Negotiations are messy, sausage making is messy, and as I have many times, I take responsibility for that. You know, when this all started, there was a 13-2 vote of council to give the city a mandate to go negotiate a deal. And we could have done what they've done in every other bid, what they've done in LA and in Paris and in all the winter bids, which is take that mandate, go negotiate a deal, come back a year or two later with a deal, and present it to the people. And I've always said that we want to be open and we want to be transparent, and many people have criticized me for that because it makes the sausage in public. I think it was the right thing to do. Ultimately, this past weekend, that was way too much sausage making. It was super messy. Certainly there were points at which I felt very betrayed by stuff coming out publicly and without context. But that said, ultimately, I got to look at the deal, and I think Calgarians have got to look at the deal as well.
So Mayor, what do you say to people who are concerned about the things we heard today, about the potential downgrade of the credit rating, the cost overruns? We don't even know if we can get this insurance. What do you say to Calgarians in the next couple of weeks? I'm asking.
I think the most important question you've asked is about this insurance. And maybe I'll spend a minute and just explain what's actually happened here. So I can test out to see if we can explain in simple language what this deal is. Here we go. So the federal government had come to the table and said, look, Cabinet has approved roughly $1.5 billion, $1.455 billion to be exact. But we require a matching, and this is where the confusion came from, which is we will match every dollar of public sector contributions from the province and from the city. The province and the city had been very clear for a long time that we couldn't get to $1.5 billion cash. It just wasn't going to work. Neither the province nor the city has the financial capacity to do that at this moment. But we said to the federal government many, many months, in fact many years ago, we're actually delivering an Olympics at a fraction of the cost of what you would expect. So the net amount that we're asking you for is much less even from Vancouver 16 years later. And where the communications breakdown happened is that a lot of folks thought that that conversation was completed. A lot of folks thought it wasn't completed. Got a little messy. But in the end, the Fed said to us, look, we got to have a match, but we're going to be very thoughtful in what we will match. It doesn't have to be cash. So ultimately, what we ended up doing is saying, hey, you know, those roads that you're building anyway into Stampede Park and Victoria Park, those are actually very helpful for the Olympic bid. So you're building them anyway, so tell you what, federal government says, you're building them anyway, we'll match that. We think that's a legitimate thing that you're putting into the Olympics, even though you're doing it anyway. So that was $150 million to help close the gap. Then the federal government said, you know, we're looking at the contingencies in this budget. There's almost $1 billion of contingencies to cover cost overruns and other things. It's very, very, very conservative and very thoughtful in those contingencies. And they said, you were planning on covering off some of those contingencies with insurance anyway. So tell you what, if you bring face value of that insurance, even though you only paid the premium, we will actually match the face value of the insurance. This is very innovative thinking in terms of how to meet that. So ultimately, we're in a situation where the city is being asked to put in $370 million in cash, plus the premiums on that insurance, which we're estimating to be about $20 million. And in return, we're being treated to a match of $1.5 billion with the province's money in there. So to me, this makes a ton of sense. And certainly insurance experts have suggested this is possible. Insurance experts being insurance experts, they really have to do a lot more due diligence, which will take weeks and weeks and months to do. But, you know, we got the initial thinking saying, yeah, we think a market exists for this. So that's important. In terms of cost overruns, you know, what we have to remember is that the cost overruns happen when you're building mega projects. In fact, a couple of my colleagues said, oh, mega projects always go over. But we're not building any. That's the key thing to remember. This is not Pyeongchang or Sochi. It's also not Vancouver. We're actually only building two things. And the City of Calgary, since I've been mayor, I think has brought every single project but one in on time and under budget. We're really good project managers. And I suspect we'll be able to do the same here on this project as well. What was the third thing, Scott? Cost overruns, insurance, credit ratings. Yeah, so that's a bit of fear-mongering at this juncture, because certainly we have to have a conversation about our credit rating, but it is not at all clear that this $390 million will be financed through debt. If it's not financed through debt, then the implication on the credit rating will be negligible.
The city has some money in the bank. Where's this money coming from?
That is a question that we would solve after the plebiscite, probably, but I will tell you that tomorrow I get to open the brand new public library. And you may recall that we funded the public library with the first ever permanent fund for community infrastructure. Now that the library is open, that call on that fund is no longer there. And in fact, I would say that the next major community infrastructure project is actually that field house. So we may be able to use that fund to actually fund a big chunk of the Olympic work.
Mayor, I understand what happened in there in terms of...
In Spanish.
There was a proposal to kill the bid. That was knocked down. What happens to the unsigned deal that we saw issued in a letter by Calgary?
That is a really important question. Thank you for asking. So we were never being asked to authorize that deal. Some time ago, Council had given the city manager the authority to negotiate a deal within a certain negotiating framework and terms and conditions. And what we heard today is that this deal fits within those terms and conditions. So Council didn't have to do anything with it, but it's important for people to know that that's what's on the table. Over the upcoming days, people will determine, does it all make sense? They'll really work on the P's and Q's and the I's and the T's, but that would never be signed without a positive plebiscite result regardless.
So will it be signed after the plebiscite and after another vote by Council?
Correct.
What do you want Calgary?
If in fact the plebiscite is a yes, then Council will be asked to authorize continuing work, and hopefully by then to actually authorize the P's and Q's and the details of the bid. Those may be two different things.
Last question.
What do you want Calgary to take away from this hectic week we've had here? What do you What do you want to say to people?
You know what? I think of NAFTA, or the USMCA as it's now called. I feel like dancing when I say that. Tough stuff requires tough negotiations. And politicians have a terrible habit of pushing this stuff to the last minute, just like human beings do. I think most politicians are, in fact, human beings. And much as I would have loved to have had this deal done in June, much as I would have loved to have it done in September, you know, it may have taken a little bit of, shall we say, aggressive negotiating tactics on deadlines to make sure we had something. And I'm super happy that we've got such a good deal.
We heard the city manager and some other members of council say that the city has let Calgarians down. They promised that something was promised and it wasn't delivered on. So how do we move forward?
Yeah, this 30 days, I don't remember ever saying 30 days. I do remember saying Calgarians need time. They need time to sit with the deal before they vote. And as I said last night, I was schooled by citizens who said, we've got plenty of time, give us the deal.